Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ethan Nadelmann, live from California. You have the floor, sir.
Charles, thanks very much, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to all of you, and I'm sorry I can't be there with you in London. But Charles asked me to make some comments about where I see, how we're going to get from where we are now, which is an area where we've clearly making progress, but also dealing with some obstacles, to where we want to be, which I would define as minimizing as much as possible the role of punitive prohibitions in dealing with drugs, while simultaneously, protecting public safety and health. I really do think that's the best way to think about it. I do think that the best way to think about drug policy reform is in terms of an array of policy options. From the most punitive policies like we see in Singapore or parts of Asia, or in some ways the United States, to the most libertarian, sort of old-fashioned tobacco models in the old days. And what I would think is that what we're trying to do here is to reduce the role of the criminal justice system, reduce the role of punitive prohibitions in drug control to the maximum extent possible while protecting public safety and health. And what that means, where we stop, how far we go, I think none of it's obvious. But I also think what we're trying to do here is to move public debate and, of course, legislation into that area where we're not between drug warriors and drug reformers, not between those who want to, keep locking up people and those who are pushing just for more treatment or education. Most valuable debates, I think, are going to be those between more free market-oriented legalizers and what might be called the harm reduction prohibitionists, the harm reduction decriminalizers. I mean, I really look forward to the day when we've made so much progress that the bitterest debates are among ourselves. And that what makes them count is that they could just have debates among, where we're fighting over principles and this, but where it's not consequential for the broader debate. But that where the fights we have and the arguments we have among ourselves between more libertarian models, more legalized models, and those that retain elements of prohibition but emphasize decrim and harm reduction, that's where the really valuable debates are going to be. Now, I think in terms of specific policy objectives, it's interesting, looking at what's going on in Europe from a distance, it was obviously mixed. I mean, it was wonderful to see what just happened in the last few days in Denmark, where the government's changing, but even if the government had not changed, my understanding is that they would be setting up safe injection facilities and a new breakthrough through there to complement the heroin maintenance. I'm encouraged when I see the decriminalization law in Poland. I think that Portugal's emergence as an international model for a serious decriminalization policy in which people who are arrested for drug possession are not punished and pivotally are not drug tested. I think that's really exceptional. I think what's happening in Norway, where you really have movement forward and this wonderful role played by the former Foreign Minister Stoltenberg, father of the current Prime Minister, I think, who also served on the Global Commission. So Norway's looking at also an interesting development in Scandinavia. So I think that those sort of, Czech Republic, for example, there's clearly been support. Now, obviously, I don't need to tell you about what's going on in the Netherlands and these efforts to ban non-Dutch citizens to go there, the ways in which the border towns are affecting national policy. I mean, that's really where you're really the experts. But I will say that one thing that, as an American, I feel oddly good about, I feel like I spent the last 20 years, whenever I go outside the United States to speak at an international audience, I feel obliged to apologize for the actions of my government in this area. And And that's still true. I mean, Obama's backed up a little bit on international front, on, dealing with issues of HIV and harm reduction, but there's still a need to apologize for the egregious and incredibly destructive role that my government has played globally over the last century and in recent years in terms of propagating and perpetuating punitive pro-victimist regime. That said, when it comes to marijuana, to cannabis reform, I mean, the odd fact of the matter is that in some respects, the United States, in a kind of haphazard way, actually, for the first time, almost ever, playing a leadership role on reform. What happened with Proposition 19 in California last year, where we went from, in space less than a year, from people saying, oh, no, marijuana legalization can never win, to a world in which people are saying, how come you didn't win, as if it was supposed to win. The fact that it got 46% of the vote, the fact that it got more votes than any of the Republican candidates for governor or senator, that was remarkable. That was really remarkable. The fact that it got the endorsements of the NAACP, our leading and really conservative African American organization, the fact that it got endorsements from elected officials, the fact that it got endorsements from major labor unions and also from police unions, the Black and Latino police unions. There was really something transformative that happened in California. And the fact that it actually received 46.5% of the vote exceeded my expectations and I think most other realistic observers and analysts in this area. It also did more to transform the national dialogue about marijuana policy than anything that's ever happened before. I mean, the fact that just on the front page of all major newspapers and television programs, that it was being treated as a serious policy option, that media was paying attention to the shifting political calculus, that was all very, very important. It wasn't just in the U.S. It was international as well. I mean, don't forget that 1 month before the November election, President Santos of Colombia convenes a summit of Latin American presidents. I think he had Central American and maybe the Mexican Calderon there. And basically says, what if Prop 19, what does that mean for America? And I have to credit Santos in Colombia, because I don't think I've ever seen a national president speaking with such sophistication out of both sides of his mouth on issues. I mean, it's ridiculous, because on the one hand, he's giving the U.S. government the rhetoric it needs in order to keep off his back. He's saying we'll keep cracking down drugs and blah, 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 and he's saying that this would be terrible if Prop 19 wins. But privately, and in his interviews and in all the other communications, he's making it clear that a victory for Prop 19 is exactly what was needed. Also endorsing not endorsing, but showing support for the Global Commission. And I'll tell you, 2 weeks ago, when President Calderon in Mexico made that comment after the brutal killings in Monterrey, and he said that if the U.S. cannot curtail its demand for drugs, then they need to pursue market solutions. And market solutions is seen the kind of way of talking about legalization without using the element. So there was clear progress. I think that Proposition 19, the marijuana legalization effort in the United States, is really quite remarkable. It's possible that support for legalization, the marijuana legalization in the United States nationally, which is about 46%, is higher than in almost any other country in the world. Maybe the Netherlands is higher, I'm not sure. Maybe a couple other places. It's now that there are more medical marijuana dispensaries operating legally or quasi-legally under state law in the United States than there are coffee shops in the Netherlands. There may well be more people buying marijuana legally or quasi-legally under state law in the United States than there are people buying marijuana legally in the Netherlands. I mean, this is a remarkable development. I think to some extent it's because of the marijuana efforts we started in 1996. But the remarkable development, the transformation, the dialogue, the legitimization of marijuana, just so you all know, there's a very good chance that marijuana legalization is going to be on the ballot in both Colorado and Washington State in November 2012. And if the funding's there, I would predict a 50% chance that one of them wins. Right now, the support for these initiatives is a little more than 50%. The opposition is in the low to mid 40%, which normally is not enough to win an initiative, but it is, we're in the ballpark. So in Congress, Barney Frank, the left-wing congressman, and Ron Paul, the libertarian Republican congressman who's running in the Republican primaries for president, co-sponsored a bill to end federal marijuana prohibition. It now has, I think, over a dozen signatories, including, remarkably, Congressman Charlie Mangle, the Harlem congressman who basically was one of the leading drug warriors in the 1970s and 80s and into the 90s. So there's something going on in my country that I think is going to open up important states, not just in my country, but around the world. And there's going to be all sorts of counter efforts, and the federal government lashes back, so it's not going to be a smooth or easy process. I don't see any prospect of us repealing federal marijuana prohibition the way we repealed alcohol prohibition back in 1933 with the National Amendment. The other thing I would say in the United States is that we may finally be reducing incarceration here. 2 years, like 2009 or 2010, for the first time in 30 years, the number of people incarcerated in American prisons and jails actually dropped. Now, mind you, our incarceration rates are 4, 6, 7 times they are in Europe, right? But what it says is that Europe continues to increase incarceration rates because of growing concerns around crime and all your issues around immigration and from Africa and the Middle East and elsewhere. It means that you have the emergency in the United States of a new direction. So we're starting off at a much worse place than people in Europe are, but arguments reducing incarceration are gaining substantial momentum. We don't know if that will have its sway outside the United States because our incarceration rates are such horrific violations of human rights that are so high, but it does suggest a step in the right direction. The third thing I just want to say is that this global commission, the global commission that came out with its report in June, with the 3 Latin American presidents and the Latin American intellectuals and, Ruth Dreyfus, former president of the Federal Swiss Council, bless her heart, and, Javier Solana, the former European Union minister, and Prime Minister Papandreou in Greece, he's got enough problems on and he stepped down this thing, Richard Branson. Hey, boards. If any of you are interested, don't look up on the drugpolicy.org website as yet. When we have a media analysis, that report resonated globally like nothing we've ever done before. It's not just that it hit the pages on, in places of part of European countries in South America, Norway, what have you. It also picked up, generated debate about legalization, decriminalization, and harm reduction in Africa and in Asia in ways that they had not previously seen before. And now more that's going to be taking funding from the Global Commission, so they're going to be taking their show on the road. There's going to be gatherings and other advocacy efforts happening in Latin America, maybe in India, other places around the world. So this is not stopping right now. There is a commitment to keep going in this area. And I think that Flint view, I think that the Global Commission really designed as a way to engage elites, to engage the guys with the big names, the former presidents, the intellectuals. But I think what it does is that it opens up political space and it opens up education space, an environment in which our advocacy, our grassroots advocacy, can really begin to get more traction. So I see this sort of what we would call in America grass ops and grassroots advocacy increasingly working in tandem, moving things in the right direction. Last words I want to say, the thing I'm most concerned about right now is the growing movement towards intensifying surveillance of individuals. I'm worried that we'll have, in the United States, we'll see fewer people in prison, but dramatic greater numbers of people, electronic bracelets, GPS devices, drug testing devices attached to them. And I think we need to be thinking about this issue creatively, because of course, almost anything is better than putting somebody in prison. But moving in the direction of what may emerge as a maximum surveillance society, where we reduce risk population slightly, but increase the number of people under the surveillance of the criminal justice system dramatically. And this is where our issue kind of merges with the immigration issue, the issues of legal and illegal immigration. I think that's something we need to be ahead of the curve in preparing for. I see what's happening in Europe and Australia, United States, around the drug driving issue. You know, the issue of driving and marijuana, and the effort to put forward what are called per se laws, where people can be convicted of driving into the influence of drugs, even though it's not an iota of evidence that they're high. It's just evidence that they consumed the joint before. So we need to be watching out for that. I was in Germany last year and seeing what the German government is doing in that area, seeing what's happening in some parts of Asia, seeing what our drug czar in the United States is pushing for, seeing what Australia, which has a very strong public health model, but not so much sensitivity to civil liberties. I'm worried about that as the insidious new frontier of opposition. So thank you all for doing what you're doing. Thank you all for being so committed to this cause. I'm deeply appreciative. I think we have about 5 minutes or so in which I can take some questions. Charles, if you'd like me to do that, and then we'll let you go on with your conference.
I know that some things under the Obama administration have improved as far as the cessation of raids on legal cannabis clubs, for example. But my little sister lives in TJ and in Tijuana. And she says that actually things have gotten a lot worse, a lot worse in the border between Mexico and California since Obama came in, and that there seems to be some kind of definite shift in policy. Do you know anything about that?
The comment
Charles, I heard it. So what I would say, well, first of all, let me just say briefly about the Obama administration. I was actually pleasantly surprised by the Obama administration during its first 18 months. Obama, when he was running for president, made 3 explicit commitments. He said that they would pull back on federal enforcement regarding medical marijuana and defer to the states that had made it legal. That secondly, they would approve federal funding for needle exchange, which absurdly had not been tolerated. And then thirdly, they would roll back these very harsh criminal sentences for crack cocaine, which had this horrific racial disproportionality in them. And to my somewhat pleasant surprise, Obama made good on all 3 of those commitments in his first 18 months. And they also began to endorse needle exchange internationally, and there was some positive movement. That said, for the last 12 months, the Obama administration increasingly looks indistinguishable from its predecessors. You know, the drug czar Kolakowski, who seems like a very nice guy, he was the police chief in Seattle beforehand, and that's where HempFest is, 100,000 people with a pro-marijuana gathering and nobody getting arrested. But he basically I can't tell the difference anymore between him and some of his predecessors. The Justice Department, has been cracking down more on medical marijuana. They've been really brutal in the state of Montana. There's an activist there named Tom Dobert who was, a key activist, and he got involved in a medical marijuana dispensary operating totally above board, and now he's threatening to destroy this guy's life. So there's a real ugliness coming out of the Obama administration in the last 12 months, and we're going to try to push back on that before the election. With respect to the border region, the interesting thing is, on the U.S. side of the border, crime rates in the U.S. border cities are actually lower than in most other major American cities. It's this bizarre thing in which there's very little violence spilling over from Nuevo Laredo or Juarez or Tijuana over into the United States. But meanwhile, south of the border, it's a horrific situation. And it's not the whole country. you see many corporations are still saying that they're not seeing this as a real problem, and you see the Mexican economy continuing to grow. But the violence in those border cities is absolutely incredible. You can see Calderon remains, and his drug war approach remained popular, but he's beginning to, as I said before, his two predecessors, Zedillo and Fox, have both called for varying degrees of legalization. Among Mexican elites, there's a growing recognition it's the way to go. I think Calderon is profoundly frustrated. I personally am not opposed to the Mexican government getting the U.S. assistance in the same way that Colombia did, to get assistance from our intelligence agencies and security agencies to more effectively crack down on the most violent drug trafficking gangs, the Zetas and what have you. On the other hand, the idea of bringing the military in there in a more kind of pervasive way does seem to me a mistaken strategy, but those are only short-term solutions. Reduce the role of pure prohibitions in drug control to the maximum extent possible while protecting public safety and health. And what that means, where we stop, how far we go, I think none of it's obvious. But I also think what we're trying to do here is to move public debate and, of course, legislation into that area where we're not between drug warriors and drug reformers, not between those who want to, keep locking up people and those who are pushing just for more treatment or education. Most really valuable debates are going to be. Now, I think in terms of specific policy objectives, it's interesting looking at what's going on in Europe from a distance. It was obviously mixed. It was wonderful to see what just happened in the last few days in Denmark, where the government's changing. But even if the government had not changed, my understanding is that they would be setting up safe injection facilities and a new breakthrough through there to complement the heroin maintenance. I'm encouraged when I see the decriminalization law in Poland. I think that Portugal's emergence as an international model for a serious decriminalization policy, valuable debates, I think, are going to be those between more free market-oriented legalizers and what might be called a harm reduction prohibitionists, the harm reduction decriminalizers. I really look forward to the day when we've made so much progress that the bitterest debates are among ourselves. And that what makes them count is that they would just have to debates among, where we're fighting over principles and this, but where it's not consequential for the broader debate. But that where the fights we have and the arguments we have among ourselves between more libertarian models, more legalized models, and those that retain elements of prohibition but emphasize decrim harm reduction, that's where the define as minimizing as much as possible the role of punitive prohibitions in dealing with drugs while simultaneously, protecting public safety and health. I really do think that's the best way to think about it. I do think that the best way to think about drug policy reform is in terms of an array of policy options, from the most punitive policies like we see in Singapore or parts of Asia or in some ways the United States, to the most libertarian, sort of old-fashioned tobacco models in the old days. And what I would think is that what we're trying to do here is to reduce the role of the criminal justice system.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Ethan Nadelmann, live from California.
Charles, thanks very much, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to all of you, and I'm sorry I can't be there with you in London. But Charles asked me to make some comments about where I see, how we're going to get from where we are now, which is an area where we've clearly making progress, but also dealing with some obstacles, to where we want to be, which I would